Okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to A Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Blum. I'm one of the co-founders of The Blaze, along with Caroline Levitt. And I am here tonight with our very, very special Friday evening guest, Sarah McCoy.
I'm so excited to be here.
Welcome back to The Blaze. We have had the privilege of having you on The Blaze before, and we've managed to reel you back in. And for those of you who don't know this, like Sarah and I are really, really good friends. So we're going to get like some serious dish tonight. And also I'm drinking a drink that is actually in her new novel.
I can't believe you made it.
I made it. It's called the Bloody Margaret because
the Bloody Margaret. It's in my book. That's
in Sarah's book, and it is a Bloody Mary with gin. And I was like, oh, must I drink this? Okay, I guess I must. So I am. So
that right there, you know what? That is a true believer, true heart friend right there who will make you drink and put it in a book.
I do what I have to do. Just to like make all the authors feel welcome, but especially you. So a few quick words about The Blaze for those of you who have not joined us before. We are a team of 35 creative professional volunteers who have been connecting writers and readers in the age of COVID since March 2020. And we are here to stay through COVID, through Delta, through Omicron, through B12, like, I don't know, it's a Zelda, like whatever is happening now. Whenever there are writers who are publishing books, we will be there to connect them with their audiences. And if you like what you see here, please give us a like on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, LinkedIn. We are ubiquitous. Please sign up for our newsletter at www.amightyblaze.com so you don't have literary FOMO ever again. No more FOMO. Nobody likes that. And tonight, for those of you who don't yet know Sarah, although everybody knows Sarah, I'm going to read her bio.
Before
we get into all like the nitty gritty stuff that only I know and talk about MUSTIQUE Island, your new novel. I'm so excited to talk about it. But first, you ready for your bio?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Like one of these drinks. That's what I always need to like hear my own bio read.
I know, really.
All right. Sarah McCoy, my soul sister, is the New York Times, USA Today, and internationally best-selling author of the novels Marilla of Green Gables, The Mapmaker's Children, The Baker's Daughter, the novella The Branch of Hazel in Grand Central, which we were both in, which is so fun, The Time It Snowed in Puerto Rico, and MUSTIQUE Island, which we are here to talk about. Tonight, Sarah's going to introduce it to us for the first time. We are scooping the world, y'all. Sarah's work has been featured in Real Simple, The Millions, Your Health Monthly, Muffington Post.
Muffington Post. That's a good
I'm just going to go with that.
I like the Muffington Post, though. I'll write for them any day.
Oh, that sounds good. Well, just going to be a salty talk. Read It Forward, writer Unblocked. She's the host of the NPR Radio monthly program Bookmark with Sarah McCoy and is a board member for literary nonprofit Bookmarks. Sarah taught English at Old Dominion and at the University of Texas in El Paso. And I knew her when she lived in El Paso.
Yeah.
So, Army brat. And was stationed in Germany during her childhood, which I also know informed some of her other novels, which are World War II novels. And after a decade in El Paso, she and her husband, Doc B, Brian Waterman, who's an orthopedic surgeon, live in North Carolina, where I saw them on Valentine's Day, and they brought me a rose. Thank you very much, which my dog Henry ate. And Sarah now lives with Doc B and her dog Gilly and her cat Tutu in Winston-Salem. So if you want to stalk her, that is where you should go. Welcome back to The Blaze.
Don't.
Ask them to stalk you. I know where you live. I know.
So funny. And clearly you are one of my best friends because you are just giving all sorts of tidbits of extra.
It's in your bio. It's in your bio where you live.
You brought me a rose and my dog ate it. We need to recreate that someday.
That is true. So on my way down to Florida this winter, Henry, my black lab, and I stopped to see Sarah and Doc B, and it happened to be Valentine's Day, and Doc B came into this restaurant where we were meeting with a rose like he was on The Bachelor. And Sarah met Henry for the first time, and Henry obligingly, like every black lab, immediately ate the rose, like ate the
Of course he did. I come from a family of labs. You know, I'm used to this. I was like, no, sure, eat the rose, my little nephew. Here you go. I'll feed it.
It was so great. Guys, if you are on the socials, there's a video of that on Twitter, on Facebook, on Insta that I put on as promo, but it's like one of my favorite moments because you are my favorite moment. So I'm really proud of this. So we met in, I think, Tucson 2014, like we'd been communicating before
You're
that.
saying that, but we actually met in 2011 because you blurbed The Baker's Daughter.
Well, I know that.
Asked you to blurb it, and then right after that, The Baker's Daughter came out, and then I went to Tucson to meet
Okay,
you.
right. But we met in person in Tucson the first time, right?
Yes, it was in Tucson. I think it was earlier. I think it was like 2012.
Oh, it might have been. My memory is terrible. That's why I'm a novelist. So I just make shit up all the
Oh
time.
gosh, I'm terrible at numbers, but I think this might be our 10-year sisterversity.
Oh my God, that is amazing. We have been soul friends ever since then. We have traveled on tour together. We are on tour for this anthology. We were both in Grand Central, where we contributed World War II stories set on the same day in Grand Central Station. And we toured with our Grand Central sisters in period costume, which was super fun. But Sarah and I were so bonded over so many things, including the fact that we were like, after the event, don't anybody talk to us. We need to go back and get room service. And I don't mean our rooms together. I mean separately. We were like,
I love room service and a robe.
mm-hmm.
That is all a woman really wants is room service and a robe and a big bed to eat her room service in her robe. Wear her robe. I mean, it's like the perfect thing.
It is.
It's so very like mystique, right? Like
I see you trying to slide back into actually talking about your book, which I promise we will. But I have to just tell readers that like we would like agree while we were on tour together that we were going to have a great time with our readers, which we love to do. And then we would go back to our hotel and then we would sit in our rooms and like text each other about our room service and like knock on the wall like we were in a Little Princess in the attic, like sending, messages through the wall, like, how's your burger? Mine's good. How's yours? It's like
the best memories. It's like camp,
It is. It was so good. It was.
We
so
need
good.
to do that again. Like and I really am not trying to, but maybe a little bit segue. But we need to go to an island location and do a little book tour and have our little bungalows and go out on the beach. And I am so ready, especially after this pandemic, to just escape somewhere tropical and paradise. I'm ready for it.
Chin. Okay, I have so many questions about this. Okay. My first question is, will there be, I'm going to back into the interview part now, but will there be a Mustique Island book tour? Like, can you have a boutique weekend for certain readers?
Oh my gosh, sign me up. I don't have one planned, but I would, you know what? We have a mutual friend who does this kind of thing. Adventures by the Book. A little plug for Susan Macbeth. Go find her. Go get on that, right?
Yeah, so Susan Macbeth runs an outfit called Adventures by the Book that takes readers into the settings of their favorite book. And I kind of feel as though, no, I don't kind of feel it. I know in my heart that Mustique Island is the place that we should go to talk about your book. And like a handful of readers can go with us. Okay, so I love this book. This book is so luscious. I texted Sarah last night. I'm like, this is my favorite. Now, tell us about this book. Can you describe it for us in your own Sarah words, your own author words?
Oh my, that's always so difficult for an author because we feel like we put so many layers into it that it's hard to give like a snippet. So the book is set in 1972 and it is, the title of the book is the actual setting, and the whole spirit of the book is Mustique Island, 1972. It is a secret celebrity island, an enclave for many of the elite and famous of the time. Mick Jagger has a place there, still does. Princess Margaret. These are some of the notable names that are there. It is privately owned. And what that means is that it does not have an official government. It has the owner is the government and the colonizing force, really. And so that was really interesting for me because I didn't think that was possible in our modern world to buy an island with people who are residents, not just residents, that is their like heritage island. So to buy an island with its people and its industry, the land, just lock, stock, and barrel. You got this island, and then not really have a government. You make the rules up. And this couple, Anne and Colin Tennant, did just that. They bought this island in the late 60s and started developing it in the 70s. And so onto this island comes my protagonist, main character, Willie Mae. And she is a Texan divorcee who has been blackballed from good British society in England when she divorces her brewery baron British husband and gets a whole bunch of his money, and then he dies. And so British society is just like, you're not allowed here anymore. And so she has no place to go, and she builds her own boat and starts sailing around the globe. And then Colin, and in his authority over this island, one of his and Colin's a real person, by the way. Colin and Anne Tennant are real people, and this island really belonged to them. So this is the historical part of the fiction. And so I can show this to you. Since we're live here, so this is Colin Tennant's
Cool.
autobiography.
Amaze.
Yes, which I found through a tiny little bookstore in Somerset, England. And then it took 3 weeks to get here, shipped it here. And it is his telling of the island and how he developed it. And let me just say, this is fact. This is supposedly fact. I don't believe a word, maybe one word, maybe a couple words, but it is so scandalous and salacious and so through the lens of a colonizing white male that I was shocked silly when I read this. And I decided, and part of where this book's inspiration came from was that in this, there was a little line about how he decided who came onto the island based on if they were beautiful enough and if they had money. So those were the two main qualifiers: if you were beautiful and you had money. And Willie Mae, my character, is based on a real life person named Billy Ray. And Billy Ray is mentioned in the memoir. A couple of lines about her, actually. Colin Tennant said that he invited this Texan ex-beauty queen divorcee to come and buy a plot because she had no place else to go. And wouldn't it be fun to have that Texan drawl around? So really, she was like a toy or something for him,
like
a little like show. Like that's what he did. Those are the kind of people he invited, as people he wanted to kind of show off to his guests and have them be part of his like fun house.
Yeah, it's like a very menagerie sort of thing, right? Like I was thinking that like Truman Capote or Dominic Dunn would have fit in well on this island to sort of just to chronicle it, because it was such a flamboyant, strange little dream that this one man had and everybody else stepped into. Yes,
exactly. And so into that comes my main character, which is Willie Mae, and then her two daughters, Hilly and Joanne. And it's about I really wanted to write a story about not just about this island, but I want and the history of it, because that's fascinating enough. We've just talked about how crazy, it's like it was a circus at the time. But I wanted it to be from a female perspective. And I also really wanted to highlight the islanders' perspectives, which I do in the book. And it amazed me and really showed me how powerful the minor characters can be in a story, because they took over for me. The minor characters in this became such powerful forces of insight and intuition, and they actually are the ones who help mold the characters, Willie Mae and her two daughters are really lost souls, and they're almost like an island in that they're isolated emotionally from each other, and yet they're yearning to be something beautiful and perfect and something admired and all these things, and yet they internally feel totally alone and lost, and they're just trying to find their own identity. And I thought that particularly during the time of the 70s, when the women's movement was going through its own sort of transition and finding itself, and there were so many other factors going on in history at the time. You had free love, right, which was super fun to play with, and part of what this island in real life was catered to be. It was this playground that even Princess Margaret came and built a villa there so she could have free love and she could do what she pleased, and she could have her lover Roddy Llewellyn in there, and he is in the book. Um, and and to just be free. Everyone wanted to be free in this time, but at the same time, this was also the same decade and time period when, almost as a counterbalance, there was this real wave of evangelical conservatism that was going on, that people were becoming very conservative. The Queen. So the opposite, and again, there's a sister quality that I was playing with too. So you have Princess Margaret, who is free, love, and wild, and then you have the Queen, who had Billy Graham come to her palace and talk to her all the time, and she was like in favor. She just admired him, and so you had these two sisters that were on opposite, wavelengths, and yet they were sisters and loved each other. And I mirrored that with the sisters Hilly and Joanne in many ways. And sisterhood is absolutely another huge theme in the book. And mothers and daughters, we've talked a lot about this in private. Mothers and daughters, and that sort of conflicted and yet deeply loving dynamic that is so hard to pinpoint. There's so many rights and wrongs, and you say so many things you regret, and yet things that you deeply mean. It's just such a, and that you love so deeply, you fight so hard and you love so deeply, and I find that dichotomy in anything interesting, those sort of rubbing against each other sides. So do you see what is this book about? I can't do it in a little like pitch. I have no idea.
Why would you need to? Okay, so I'll do the elevator pitch for you. It would be like,
Yeah.
So a Texas beauty queen goes to a mysterious island that's owned by a flamboyant and decadent playboy. And there she builds a new life with her two daughters, who are somewhat at odds with each other, surrounded by a cast that includes Princess Margaret and Mick Jagger and a lot of the celebrities of the era. Boom.
This is why I need you to come with me on book tour.
And I would love to.
Elevator pitch, and then I can get my brain together and ramble.
You're not meant. No, the thing is like you gave us this like beautiful like encyclopedic overview of the book, which we need, and it is a kaleidoscope of a book because it has so many factors and so many themes that make it such a rich book and make it such a luscious book. Like, to me, that's the word I keep returning to. It's just this very yummy book. Like, one of my favorite descriptions in this book is of a cloud, and I dog-ear the pages when I really love something. There's a lot of really gorgeous descriptive writing in this book, and that's one of my favorite things about any fiction. So I was reading, I found a little cloud, and this is kind of what the book reads like to me. In the distance, a little storm cloud misted a rainbow no bigger than Willie Mae's thumb. It quietly moved across the milky horizon like the colored marshmallow cereal her girls used to eat, which we all know what that is. The whole book is like that. It's full of color. It's full of sensuality. It's full of these beautiful visual images. It's very tactile. And the island is such a character too. But part of what makes the book luscious is not just that tropical setting that we all want to escape to. Like, who doesn't want to be on Mustique Island? Like, it sounds like the ideal place to be, but to get away from your own quotidian life. But it also has so many different things in it and so many layers of it that accrete. And one is the sisterhood, and one is the mother-daughter thing, and one is the escape from life and trying to grow where you're planted or grow where you found yourself. and one is all of the celebrity luster, and then just the very serious, to me, sort of bedrock of colonialism that underlies the whole book, that I thought was so brave. So there are many, many layers to this book, but it all reads as this very luscious thing. And I wanted to talk about the actual writing in the book too, that it struck me in a couple of different ways. And one was the detail, and one was another facet that I would get to. But if I were in an elevator with you and you gave me the elevator pitch, I would say, what to you is primary about this book? Is it historical fiction? Is it a mother-daughter story? Is it an island story? Is it about sisterhood?
I would say it is definitely a I don't know why I hesitate when I say this, but maybe it's because I'm reinventing my own definition of what this means. But it is a beach read. It is a book that you want to sit on the beach and read. And my kind of beach read is not necessarily just a float away kind. I like to read something that, yeah, I'm escaping, but at the same time, it's making me feel deep, and it's making me think differently about my surrounding around me. And it's making me, at the end of the book, I like to close a book and feel like I have learned something new and I am wiser in heart knowledge, in head knowledge, and knowledge about the world around me. I am just smarter than I was when I sat down to read it. And that, though, is not necessarily always in a genre beach read. Sometimes, so that's where I'm having like a hard time. And this is where, though, the book is about this. It's about not being defined by other people's definitions, not letting yourself adhere to a pattern that someone else has decided is the way that you should live, or the way that a good, anything, fill in the blank, should be. And that was something, it was super important to me. It was, as I wrote the book, is just that we tend to so easily fall underneath these rules of etiquette and social parameters. But why? Like, when you stop and ask, but why is it a good thing if I cinch my waist in a dress and wear high heels? Like, if you like it because you like it because it makes you feel okay, then that's your definition. But if you're doing it because you feel like that is what a woman should look like, well, then you need to bust that mold open. You need to find what you define as your womanhood, and what you define as what makes you feel good. And so that was something I definitely played with in this book, is just busting parameters. And so I need to do the same thing about my own definition of what a beach read is, because I do think this is a summer beach read book club book in a different way than all my other books were.
It's a really enjoyable, like, I feel soothed reading this book. Like, it is great armchair travel, and there's something about the physical details of it that I find like super soothing. Like, I know what things smell like and taste like, and the rum punch with the saffron in it, and I can feel all the breezes. And again, like, who doesn't want to be on the island? But there also is exactly the quality that you said about learning things from this book. And I felt as though this was a new quality in your work, or maybe I just noticed it for the first time and I was picking up on it in a different way. But like, I tried to define or describe it for myself, and I was thinking of it as like authorial maxims, or like there are these axioms in the book that are stated with this like great simple authority, and they're sort of embedded in all of the luscious description and all of the action, and Willie Mae and her daughters and their stories. But like, I pulled out some of them because they were like my favorites, and I flipped up the pages because I'm like, I really love these. So some of what I'm talking about is like this, like Willie Mae is describing her daughters, and she says they were artists, the heroes of their own lives. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a very, it's a very sort of striding, simple statement, like with great authority. Or heartbreak was a living plague was another one of my favorites, also true. Not every union was a good one, and not every split was bad. One of the characters talking about a divorce. There is nobility in a simple task done well, which again, I feel is true. And why was it a woman's job to be ashamed of so very much when men
Mhm.
were ashamed of so very little? And so I kept pulling out these things that were stated with this great authority and very simply in a way that made me trust them. And that is a quality I feel like amplifies the book and augments the book, that makes it above like what we think of as a typical beach read. I think of a beach read, and forgive me, but like they're super enjoyable books. I often listen to them in my car because if I'm having a fit of road rage and yelling at somebody who cut me off and I miss a paragraph, it's not going to destroy the experience of the book, right? It's just going to mean that I missed a paragraph, but oops, I can pick up the thread, no problem. Like, I don't want to miss any words of this, you know? So I feel like it's elevated. That's the term. It's like the elevated beach read. So I'm wondering whether that seemed like a deliberate inclusion for you, or maybe a departure from some of your earlier books, or was I just not picking up on them in the same way?
You were not picking up on them in the same. No, I'm kidding.
Probably that could be.
No, no. Oh, first off,
I'm like very perspicacious now. I read like
no.
of the
You know, you are not only one of my bestest friends, but I also, like I said about writing and reading books, I like to learn things from the relationships I have with my literature, and I like to learn things from the relationships I have with my best friends.
Okay.
And so your opinion just means absolutely the world to me, because I think you're a brilliant writer and I think you're a brilliant reader and teacher. So thank you first off for all of that. But also I have to say, I didn't try. I think that first off, I just am older. I'm just older now than I was 10 years ago when we first met and I was first writing. And so life changes you. It makes you just want to just put things out there more simply and just to say it how it is, because who has, and I think the pandemic is part of that too. You know, I think I've told you this already, but I'll say it for everyone. I rewrote this 4 times. I wrote the first draft, and I don't mean like, oh, I'll tweak it, I'll just play with it. I mean start to finish, dump the pages, burn the prose, rewrites 4 times. It it made me like, talking about my poor husband, like he just was like, whoa, what is she going through? Because I was neurotic. So I wrote the first draft, and then the pandemic hit, and that book was a beachier read, as we described it earlier, and it just no longer fit the world we lived in. It didn't fit who I was. I had changed. It didn't fit who the readers were anymore. It didn't fit our world. It didn't fit. It didn't fit. I couldn't have it. So that got axed, and I rewrote it during quarantine. Mistake, because then it was really dark. It turned out to be this super tragic.
Like everybody dies.
Oh my God, you have no idea how many people died. Death was everywhere, and not just small deaths, like these horrific, tragic, awful, cry your eyes out, kill your darlings deaths. And then I wrote it that way. And then we came out of lockdown, and I realized I don't want to read this book again. So why would I want readers to pick this up and read this? This is awful. This is just depressing. When I say awful, just depressing. So then I axed that, and I took out all the parts that I found hopeful and encouraging, and I rewrote based on those. And then I rewrote one more time, based on a sensitivity reader, which was incredible. She is in the acknowledgments. Her name was Isabel. And I cannot say enough. If any other writers out there who are afraid of sensitivity readers, don't be afraid. Yeah, they're going to break you, but they're going to break you in the best possible way. And so I rewrote based on her, and she was from the West Indies. She's an editor out in the West Indies, originally from London, I think. And she just was phenomenal in showing me that I needn't be afraid to use my Puerto Rican background.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd been kind of afraid to go that because I'm half Puerto Rican. My mother's Puerto Rican. My father is, um, I mean, he's a mix of white people. He's Irish and he's got a little bit of Choctaw Indian in him, but he's mostly just Oklahoma. Whatever Oklahoma is,
Mhm.
that's my father. Let me tell you. So I felt a little bit. Wow, I'm getting real here with you all, but I felt a little bit fearful of dipping into that, especially after some of, the things that other authors have gone through, American Dirt,
Mhm.
where authors were taken to task because they weren't entirely one ethnicity or another. And so I was just really scared. And she showed me, don't be scared. You are who you are. You are Puerto Rican and you're an American, white American. So use that and show the beauty of all those different sort of the prism of
Mhm.
different colors that are on an island. I mean, the Caribbean is just all colors. It really is. It. So the islands, for those, just a quick, the islands in the Caribbean were originally the Taino and Arawak Indians.
I did not know that
Yeah.
actually.
And then you have the French and the British who all came in and colonized at different times, all right next to each other. And so you have all these cultures that are all together, um, trying to figure out who they are. And that very much is the book too. Like they're all trying to figure out who they are, um, based on who is the majority owner at the time.
It's
So,
so funny because I kept remarking on color in the book too because I'm very affected by color, like in daily life and
hi,
when
yeah.
I'm reading. And I also have synesthesia, which means that I see letters and numbers as having color. So color is like a huge part of my life. And there was so much color in this book, and it was referenced in this very vibrant and very consistent way. So some of the other pages that I dog-eared, one of the lines was, "Under the sunlight, the bottles reflected a rainbow across the floor and up the walls." And then on the next page, there's this great line about Willie Mae holding up a jar of sea glass, blue, coral, green, clear, and colors. So in between, she couldn't say what they were. She held it up to the lamplight and softly jangled the stones, and a kaleidoscope spun up the ceiling and around the walls. And in every chapter and every scene, there's some description of color and of light. And now hearing you talk about it, I was very struck by it when I was reading it. But did you think that it was a conscious or subconscious way of refracting back the kind of melting pot that is
Absolutely.
the population of the islands?
Absolutely. One of my earliest memories is actually of my grandpa, telling me that Puerto Ricans and that my family there were all colors of the rainbow. And I took that as absolute truth because I was at the time sitting on our farm in Puerto Rico, looking around at all my tios and titis and my cousins, and they were every single color. Um, and blonde hair, brown hair, black hair. It just everyone was everything. And so to me that was normal. I actually and I wondered, and this is where we're kind of you feel a little bit of shame, and this is where the sensitivity reader really opened my mind. Is that we're taught though that if you don't see color, then maybe then that's equally wrong. That you should see color and respect color and of skin and tone. And I do that, but at the same time, I grew up not seeing it. I thought we were all just family.
Mm,
That's the way the
mm,
island was. We were all family.
mm.
And so that is definitely in the book. That's in the book that you know, we're all together in a sense, but at the same time, again, that dichotomy I talked about earlier is that yes, islanders might be all colors of the rainbow, but there is that, like you said, that underlying white colonial power
Mm.
that you cannot ignore because it is still part of our culture and it's terrifying. It's terrifying. So that was something that I had to delicately sort of balance.
Mhm. It is delicately balanced, and Willie Mae, the heroine, I think of her as the main heroine, even though she and her two daughters each get like points of view narration. But she's the one we imprint on first, like a duckling, and she's kind of like she's not the Nick Carraway of this book because she has a much bigger role, but she has the traditional role in literature of the outsider coming into an ecosystem and being able to look around and say, "Oh my gosh, curiouser and curiouser," right? So, Willie Mae is the way in which we're introduced to the island's colonialism and then the effects on some of the people who might have been there before. So I would love to, I mean, I was going to like not ask this question sort of first, but I was fascinated by that and how it might have been hard to write. And now I'm really interested in the intersectionality between that and and your sensitivity reader. Like, I imagine that you being you are like really conscious of this going in, like Colin, who is the colonizer, and not surprisingly, his name is Colin.
Yeah, I know.
He is like he's a buffoon in many ways. Like he's like really a flamboyant character. He's somebody who loved to watch on the page, but he's always making people do these awful things, like dress up in these theatricals every time somebody comes to the island. So I wanted to ask about that. That the sort of bizarre way that he requires that people dress and eat and put on these shows is very much at a 90-degree angle with the people who are waiting on the white people who live there and who seem to have much greater reserve of common sense and knowledge. So I was wondering if you could talk about, I know Colin is a real person, but like how you developed that awareness through Willie Mae that like things here are really unequal and this guy is like a little bit of a fool and yet he has all this power. Like, can you talk about that imbalance and how you created it and then also or recreated it, and then how, like, what was the most surprising thing your sensitivity reader told you about this facet?
So, like I said, I read his autobiography and I also listened to an audiobook, the new book that just came out by his wife, Lady Glenn Connor. I don't know if you knew that she put out a book. Yes, it just came out last year, and it's a memoir about her life with Colin and Lady Glenn Connor. Go find this book, guys. It's, I mean, and the things again that she tells, the stories she tell, I couldn't write in this book, in my book, because people wouldn't believe it. They'd be like, "That's outlandish," and yet she says it as fact. So I used a lot of that content to sort of inform me on what the mindset was of these individuals who own this island and their connections with the people who were already on it when they came and the people who they then brought or they invited to come. And I thought it was really important that I, like I said at the beginning, gave the minor characters. So there's a man named Titus who is sort of the business right-hand man of Colin and is really the bright mind and wisdom. And he does all the money business that has to do with the island, trying to keep this island afloat because Colin really had no business sense in real life either. He had no business sense. So and Titus is a man of color and from the island and highly educated and went to the university in St. Vincent and has a degree in business. And he's just all these things and a really kind of a combination of a lot of the men I admire in my family in Puerto Rico, like who are undervalued by a lot of people because they have a very thick Spanish accent and the color of their skin. And really, that's the only difference between them and anybody else. And so I wanted to highlight that, and I wanted to highlight the people who live on the island and come from the island and are of the land there. That was super important to me, to give them their and the females particularly, to give them their voices. And doing that, if you ask, did you consciously tiptoe or anything? No, I just tried to be honest. Like I said, I realized as I get older, just speak truth. Don't try to put a bunch of adjectives around it. Don't try to like, mold it up all pretty, shine it. If you just speak truth from the heart, especially in books, I
Mhm.
think that's what readers, at least when I read a book, that's what I want. I
Mhm.
want just truth, and I want it to come from a place of um, authenticity.
Mhm.
However, the author wants to put it through a character or through themselves, whatever, but truth and authenticity that has a hopeful inspiration to it. Like I don't want to be because there's a lot of truth and the truth that comes that's like depressing and like okay, we've been through that. I want hope and I want something that gets me I don't know, feeling like this might be a hard struggle we're going through, but we're gonna get through this and we're gonna rise above. And that's really what this book became for me.
Mhm.
And there's no better um, character study to use for that kind of starting from some place of struggle and rising above like a phoenix than minority people. And so they were the inspiration and highlight for me really in this book. You have the main characters, but those islanders, man, I still think about them and I love each one of them so much.
Mhm. Same, and just sort of like the tenacity and endurance and dignity in the face of like the sort of foolishness of the people who had more of the power, I thought was really striking, but it wasn't like an in your face kind of thing. It was all very subtle. I think that's maybe what I was responding to in this book very clearly is just that sense of like, I am just speaking my truth through these sentences and like a little bit of impatience with anybody who is being foolish. Like I feel like,
We all though, like I feel don't we
you
all though
know,
see we see people on in the public eye who are famous, and we have for the past few years seen people in the public eye who are famous, who are doing ridiculous things and saying ridiculous things, and we're all just kind of tired of it. Like, my God, okay, let's all grow up and try to get along and make a world of this and not be so combative and angry. And
Mm.
so, you know what I mean? I'm with you.
Yeah, I feel that, and I like that, and I think Willie Mae is such a good mouthpiece for this because she has that attitude of rueful, like she's very funny and she has a great sense of humor about everything that's happening around her. But there's also this sort of rueful sense of exasperation when people are being especially stupid. Like when Princess Margaret comes to the island, Colin, who owns the island, and I never thought that he was actually the governor of the island, but of course he is. Asks everybody to dress up and he wants her to look especially Texan. So he makes her wear Keds and they give her this terrible blister that basically cripples her and like, ruins her big toe. And the way that she kind of thinks about this is exactly what I'm talking about, that there's a sort of tolerance of his foolishness because he can't be anything else than what he is. And then at the same time, he also is ludicrous, and she's able to call that out. Hi, Margaret, and also hi, Anissa. Thank you for
I
joining
know. I
us.
saw both of them. I was like,
I
Anita.
know, and also Margaret. I was drinking, but I drank most of it. But it's called a Bloody Margaret, which is a
Bloody
Bloody
Margaret.
Mary with gin instead of vodka because of Princess Margaret in the book. Speaking of which, I wanted to know because I don't think I've ever been brave enough to do this, but what it is like to write about actual people within a work of fiction. I think of it as like the E.L. Doctorow, component. But especially somebody like Princess Margaret, like Colin is Colin, and you know who Colin is. But like if you said to me Colin Tennant, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, you wrote about Colin Tennant. But if you're saying I wrote about Princess Margaret, I'd be like, oh my gosh, you wrote about Princess Margaret. Like, how many times did you watch The Crown while you were
Oh my God.
like all the time? So like,
Loved the crowd. It
really,
was I'm like, when is there, I need more. I need more. I actually, on the plane ride, coming back from overseas just last week, I watched Spencer.
oh yes, yes, I totally want to watch Spencer. Yes, yep.
Oh, and I realized I am just obsessed with British royalty.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
straight up obsessed.
Yep. So how was it to like write Princess Margaret? Was it easy? Did you feel like you knew her better? Did you feel like,
I actually,
closer to her now?
I really loved it. because I think we all kind of have a little bit of a crush on Princess Margaret, like the whole world does. And so there's just something cheeky about her, and we want to know her more, and yet I think we're all a little scared of her. Like if we actually did meet her, I think we're all a little scared that she would like cut us with her words, and something about that is even very appealing. Like, oh, at least to me, I'm like, oh goodness, I would have to be very careful. Oh,
Oh my God, you're such a massive. I'd be like, I would try to curtsy and she would put out her cigarette on me. It's probably
right.
and I would be like, bitch, you just did not do that. And I'd be mad. That's how my Princess Margaret interaction would go.
But that's exciting for some reason. So I loved writing her. And also, you know, I felt like something in Princess Margaret too is very vulnerable, don't you think? Like there's a vulnerability there and a pain and a secret something. And we all have that. We all have our show person, and then we all have these secret pains. We all do. Every single person that we carry and we kind of shield and hide, and we, you know, we put on our best, like sort of snappy cynicism to cover it up. And that was Princess Margaret. And I loved being able to write her. And yeah, you know, I didn't write a whole lot of her actual dialogue because yeah, I wanted to kind of honor her own person, real life person spirit. But she's just a force of like when she was in a room, she kind of took over in my book. And so that was a lot of fun to write that actually. And yes, I watched The Crown, and yes, I read a whole bunch of books. In the back of this book, there is a list of books. And one of my obsessions is documentaries. So I watch a lot of like BBC documentaries and PBS documentaries, and there's some of those in there. And so I watched a lot of footage on Princess Margaret just to kind of get into her kind of head and spirit, and I don't know. So I'm glad it worked for you. It was a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, it totally did. And I think you captured really well my impression of her. Not that I knew her, really well, like she's my friend, Princess Margaret, but I feel as though the most acerbic people are usually the ones who are being the most self-protective. So I absolutely feel like she's a spiny kumquat with a very soft center. And sort of like just in an interesting way in life, got that second sibling role and it defined who she was, not only in her own life, but in history. So I feel as though a lot of the prickliness of her was due to that. But you knew when she came into a room, she was probably going to say something that would cut somebody. And so there's a sort of Christians and Lions quality about when she comes onto the page, because you're like, oh God, what is she going to say to whom now, in what way, so she was definitely a spark of liveliness and an already lively and also yet very dreamy and atmospheric book. So two things I would love for you to clarify for your readers while you're introducing this book. One is the character of the island itself and the physicality of the island. And again, I can't say it enough. It's the place where most of us would want to be, and yet you couldn't go because of COVID. And there's a part in the acknowledgments, which I always read, and thank you for putting me in the acknowledgments because I cried. So thank you for that. But there's a part in the acknowledgments in which you thank George Saunders for telling you to basically speaking of The Crown, to Google and carry on.
Yes.
Google on. And when the pandemic prevented you from going to the island. So my questions about that are, how do you know George Saunders, who PS was on the Blaze at one point? We're also awed by that. And also, what was it like to try and recreate the island when you couldn't go to the island? Because was that hard, or was it like a sort of a delicious thing to do when you were housebound?
Well, first off, you know how I know Sir George.
Well, I know, but not everybody knows that story.
Okay, yes, true. Well, because Jenna was with me. She was in the hotel room next door to me when I was knocking on the walls having room service. So we were at Unbound Book Festival, shout out, in Missouri together. Jenna and I, and George Saunders was there. And he did the keynote one night, and then the next day I happened to be walking across the Unbound Book Festival. I don't even know. I guess what university is that?
WAD is the University of Missouri
University
in
of Missouri.
Columbia, and the most beautiful green campus. This is when we were like walking around rhapsodizing about the little green leaves.
The little green leaves. It was spring. It was Easter. It was Easter weekend.
Yes,
That's right.
such a good festival.
We
So
were
good.
there for Easter together. And so I'm walking across this quad and I'm like focused on where I'm going. And right into me comes George Saunders. And I was like, George Saunders. And he's like, yes. And I said, oh my goodness. And so we ended up sitting there talking like under like one of these like beautiful campus trees just about writing and life. And I mean, it was really one of these really weirdly, you know, dreamy moments for a writer. And then after that, we exchanged emails and we just sort of kept up. And he's just such a mentor, really, for published writers, for new writers who haven't put out anything, for writers who are in the process of writing their first poem, whatever. He is such a mentor. And so I was catching up with him on email and whining, really sadly. I was just whining about how I'm writing this book and I wrote it and I was planning to go. I have it all worked out to go to Mystique, and now we're under, the pandemic and I lost everything and I can't go. And he wrote me back, "Very George Saunders, just Google it." And then once I had I felt like once that dawned on me, and he also went on to give me names of people that he knew who had never been to the locations that they were famously lauded for writing about. He said because they just Googled it too. And so then I thought, okay, I can, once you have that permission, it's like, oh, okay, I can do this. Stop whining, get on with it. And then, and then your other question was about writing. The second person who actually was super helpful was my editor, who reminded me when I again was feeling really sheepish, because I have gone to every single location I have ever written about in any book. I've always set my own boots there and walked the territory. And I think that was that's the problem though, is that when you start thinking that there's a formula or a pattern to anything in life, how you should be, who you should be, how your family should be, anything, including your writing, that's when the universe likes to say, no,
yep,
there's not a pattern and there shouldn't be a pattern and everything should be unique and its own creation. So I started to think that the pattern was I needed to go to all my locations in order to be able to write properly about them. And this taught me that I don't. And my editor said to me, she reminded me, Sarah, first off, you do write fiction. Like if this were nonfiction about Mystique Island, then you have to go there. It's like a journalistic duty. You have to go. But this is fiction, first off. And she said, second off, you do remember that you are half Puerto Rican. Right. And Puerto Rico is in the Caribbean, and it is all, the winds that come off Puerto Rico, they're going to come right down past Mystique. So could you not use that content, a whole life content of living in the Caribbean and growing up there and the people there, to influence and use in this book? And so that's what I did. I Googled, I don't know if you can hear my dog.
Like, what is even happening in there?
Earlier, I turned around in the middle of you talking. I didn't want to think I was rude, but he was devouring something behind me, which I think might now come out later.
That might be a thing. Also, your flowers have been kind of moving periodically, and I'm like, is that Tutu the cat or is it Gilly?
It is Gilly. He is at my feet and he is just wanting attention right now.
It's so funny. When Henry was a puppy, as soon as I got on a Zoom or I did any interview for Blaze, Henry would take out all the toys from his toy basket and push them violently against my legs. So I would be being like pushed to the side all the time, like I was a buoy in Jaws. Gilly, hi.
Mommy's doing a show.
Yeah.
She's eating things. I think he like ate some sort of like
some flowers.
I have no idea back there.
I think he ate. I think that some flowers might reappear later magically. Like, sorry.
See, and now though, I don't even. Oh, we were talking about writing about Puerto Rico. So I used all that in my storytelling, and it was actually really beautiful to be able to return to Puerto Rico and the Caribbean and that sort of like lush atmosphere that I wrote my first book about. So so that was really helpful, and I was able to write the book, and I googled all the strange things that I didn't know about Mystique Island, and I think it came out pretty okay.
Yeah, I would never have known if you hadn't told us that you hadn't gone. I think you had gone at some point. I'm sorry to tell you that anything you say now is totally undermined by your dog. So I'm going to ask for reader questions because I know we had a couple of reader questions out there. Try to get us back on track. Anissa, for both authors, do y'all talk a lot with each other about your books while you are writing? That's to you, Sarah. You can answer that first.
Okay. Jenna tries. She's so open.
I'm very nosy.
She really does. She'll text me and say, "What are you working on? If you feel comfortable sharing, please do." Always. And I love her for doing the, like, if you feel comfortable sharing.
I'm eternally optimistic about it.
And I never do. And part of why I never do share and talk about what I'm writing is because I almost want that trap door if I want to, like I did with this book, tear it all up and start from scratch. And I feel like if I tell the story to my dearest friend Jenna, and then I tear it up, and then later I put out a book, and she says to me, "What happened to that other thing that?" And then I feel like almost like I don't know, like I've lied, or I've not done. I don't know. I need the freedom to kind of like write wherever it's going to go and be able to throw it away if I want to. So typically I don't really talk much about a book while I'm writing it, as Jenna.
You need like creative latitude to do you want to do. I mean, the amount of lying I have done to audiences when they're like, "What are you working on?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm working on this book that's about blah blah blah." Like, remember my prequel sequel to The Lost Family, which I described in great detail on my tour, and I'm like, "I'm writing this, and it's gonna be great." And I had like an outline on my wall, and I never actually wrote that. And someday I may, but like that's not what I'm working on. So I just am very comfortable lying to people about what I'm working on and being like, "This is the best book ever." And then the next day I'm like, "Except not. So not going to work on that right now." You have a conscience. I have no conscience. Is what it is.
But you know, we do share with each other kind of what it's about. Like we give each other like little, like, you know,
Glimmers.
Yeah, like little like, well, it's like set in the 70s and it's on an island, and you know, we give each other a little bit. So
you know something about my new book that nobody else knows, and you know where it came from too, which is very, very cool.
It means so much to me. Like
oh my God, it was a moment. I had this moment yesterday while I was rereading Mystique, and it just inspired me in this major way. And so maybe
excited.
Someday we'll know, like once that book is actually out of my head on paper, published in like 14 years, they'll be like,
no, it'll be sooner, readers. And I am so excited to be able to say that I was some part of this mastermind creation inspiration that is going to come forth from Jenna Blum. So
oh, thank you. I hope so. So yeah, but I think that, I mean, I'm so used to working with authors all the time because I teach a novel workshop, and I'm totally accustomed to the way the novels shapeshift, or like the baggage shifts during flight, right? So you think you're writing about one thing, and then you end up writing about something that is completely different. And I, will read a book in workshop, and then 3 years later it's published and it's like barely the same book. So I have to reread it before I interview that person, like in a bookstore somewhere. So it is to be expected. I talk a lot about what I'm working on, I think not publicly, but to other writers who I trust, because it teaches me how much I know about what I'm doing. Like, I think I'm very confused about what I'm doing, but then I hear myself explaining the book to somebody and I'm like, oh, I knew more than I thought I did. So somehow that verbalizing of my mental barf. Like, it's not totally barf. Like
Jenna, I know well, who uses terms like mental barf. Like this is the real us now. Yeah,
that's a good line. Mental barf. I'm a writer, man. I am a writer. That is a beautiful.
I love you so much. Oh my God.
Sorry. Yeah, so Jen Gilpin, who I have met at readings, and I think you might have met at readings too, is asking about the title of your Civil War book, which is outstanding. There we go. It's outstanding. And she's thinking Baker's Daughter, which is actually an outstanding book, but not the Civil War book. So,
Yeah, no, so she's talking about the map maker's children. Is that what we're talking about? Yeah. Okay, and she says,
Yep.
"I will tell the Civil War book was outstanding." I'm thinking the Baker's Daughter. Yes, you're thinking this is the Sarah Brown story.
Mhm.
And thank you so much for reading the Sarah Brown story. That was really I loved writing her. My sister Sarah.
And Sisters, that was a great book. And the cover too is, can we talk about your covers? Like, I
Oh.
love the cover so much. I remember the cover reveal from this because I had pure pig envy of it. I was like, that is a bound chicka wow cover if I have ever seen one.
Oh, I love this cover.
It's so luscious. Like, I love the colors of this cover, but then I also love the 70s font. It tells you exactly when this is set. It tells you about an era of glamour. It tells you it's historical fiction, and yet you just want to be there. So great.
I was really, really pleased with this cover. I actually got 9 different versions, and I think 4 of them were this graphic, but different text, fonts and such on it. And then I think there were 4 or 5 maybe that were different graphics than this. And some of them were like sherbety, sort of like Island Sunset. And I had my agent and my editor and a lot of people really, really liked the sherbety pink purples. And I just love green and blue. I love bright sort of.
It's Caribbean.
Yes, that is the Caribbean to me. And so I really fought for. I really wanted this particular cover, this image, and then everything else just sort of came together. And I tell you though, what really did it for me was these stripes. I really liked those sort of like game show 1970s stripes.
Yes, like the combination. If it were just the image, that would be fetching, because I love the colors. And who, again, doesn't want to be on this island, but there's something about this sort of like fantasy island. Like, remember that show and like this sort of like the Love Boat in that era. And it tells you, like, I see this and my hair automatically flips into Farrah waves, or I wish that it did. And then it echoes like the firefly looking mansion on the cliff. It's just
there. I want to be like, I really enjoy, I'm a map girl. You know this, that I have maps in my other books. So I like almost that, being able to open a book and visually, even though you're about to read words that are more sort of, your own imagination coming up with the scenes. I like to actually visually be able to see the place. And so this kind of does that without a map. It gives like the reader sort of a window into this actual island setting, which I really liked.
It is. It's like a porthole. Okay, so Anissa is saying, thank you, Sarah. You know what? It has been over an hour that I'm talking to you, and I just realized that. So we have.
I can't wait to see you in June too, Anissa.
I want to see you in June. Why does Anissa get to see you in June? I don't get to see you in June.
To Mount Airy, the event I'm doing in Mount Airy at the library there. So you're welcome to come to Mount Airy.
And I owe Anissa a visit because I blew through South Carolina without stopping to see her. It was so rude. Sorry, Anissa. Okay, so gonna let everybody go. Sarah, do you have one more thing you would like to say to your readers as Mustique Island drops May 10th? Do you have any message that accompanies that publication?
I just want to thank everyone for reading and embracing and passing this book around and reading it on the beach and reading it with your book clubs. And just that was the reason I wrote this, is to give everyone an escape this summer after all we've been through the past few years, and to give an escape that has some depth to it and some ability for change and learning and hope and exploration and all the things that really the pandemic shut down for us. And now we're saying, no, universe, we're going to live again. We're going to live, and we're going to find out things new about the world around us and share those with the people we love. And that's what this book is about. So I just hope that it I hope everyone enjoys reading. And come find us, right? Both of us on social media and say hello.
Yes, we are always there. Guys, our producer Karen is putting the buy link in the chat to Mustique Island. You should buy at least 50 copies of it right now. And for all of your mothers, all your 50 mothers, because it does make a great Mother's Day gift, I have to say. It's a mother-daughter book. So if you get it now, you have the scoop on when it comes out next week, and your mama will be so happy, and so will you, because you can read it before you give it to her. Sarah, we love you.
I love you, Jenna.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. Thank you for keeping us company tonight on A Mighty Place. Bye.